Well, that was file video of students, I believe, in Georgia saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And the pledge has been said in the classroom since the 1800s. But now this tribute is tearing one town apart. Vermont's Woodbury Elementary School banning recitation of the pledge in the classroom, saying children should not be forced to say or hear the words "One Nation Under God." And those who want to say the pledge can do so if they leave the classroom and go to a second-floor gymnasium to do it away from the other students. Well, some parents are outraged, saying this is now no solution at all. Michael Newdow is an atheist who challenged the Pledge of Allegiance in schools all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court unsuccessfully. You know how he feels about the pledge, and he joins us live to debate this Vermont situation. Michael, thanks for being here. Good morning to you.
Thank you for having me.
So, you know, the parents in this Vermont school district, some of them, not all of them, are ticked off that their kids who just want to stand up in the morning and say the pledge, as they had in the past, are now being kicked out of the classroom, told to go upstairs to a gymnasium, say it privately, then return to their lessons. I know you don't think it's legal. I know you don't think it's constitutional, but can you relate to the feelings of ostracism that the parents of these children are worried about?
Sure, but that's what you should be relating to the parents of the atheists who have to say these words under God and are ostracized because they can't say those words. So the feeling is the same, and that's why government shouldn't get in the religion business. If it stays out, no one will be ostracized.
But right now it is constitutional to say the pledge in the morning, and the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled, well, you tried to challenge it, but unsuccessfully. Right now it's constitutional. That's why it's happening across this country.
No, right now it's happening. It's never been challenged, it's never been ruled on by the Supreme Court, so we don't know if it's constitutional.
Right, but the Supreme Court declined to rule it unconstitutional in the case that you brought.
They declined to rule it constitutional, too.
Well, the last time they ruled on it, they said school children can opt out of reciting the pledge if they want to.
They've never ruled on the Pledge of Allegiance.
But they opted that they ruled that children could opt out of it. And if your child can opt out of it, that means that they should opt out in the classroom, argue some. And those who want to say it should be permitted to.
You're talking about the 1943 case before it had the words under God. So it's a different issue.
I see. So once you bring God into it, that changes everything for you.
Not for me, for the Constitution. The Constitution specifically excludes religious information.
I know, but as you know, there are references to God throughout our country's history on court buildings. The U.S. Supreme Court has a picture of Moses inside the courtroom. We have a prayer in Congress and so on. You know that God and references to religion are very much intertwined with our history.
With our history, yes. And the question is, does government endorse any religious view? And when government leads children in saying that we are a nation under God, they're endorsing the view that God exists, which is impermissible. They can't say that God exists. They can't say God doesn't exist. They have to stay out of that business. Well,
they've got words under God and so on many monuments, and as I said, in court buildings, and always have, and it hasn't been a problem up until recently when atheists like yourself have suddenly found something that's never been written in the Constitution, which is there can be no reference to God.
It doesn't say, no one's saying there can be no reference to God. It's what we're saying is what the Supreme Court has said many times, is that government may not endorse any religious view. It can't endorse the view that God exists. If it wants to talk about the fact that the framers owned slaves and the framers believed in God and things like that, they can do that. But we can't have slavery, and we can't have government endorsing the view that God exists.
There's a real debate over that, Michael, as you know. Many of the justices, please. Many of the justices feel that the government is allowed to endorse religion over irreligion, as they put it. That what they're not permitted to do, is endorse one specific religion over another, and the Pledge of Allegiance,
how do you make a distinction between a specific religion
doesn't do that.
And the belief in God? It talks about belief in God. It's a religious view. What's the difference constitutionally between one nation under Jesus and one nation under God?
Because the history of this country is wrapped up in the recognition of God. Right, because the 95% of this country is some sort of Christian, believes in some sort of a God. So why should 95% of the country bow to the 5%, Michael? Why shouldn't those who don't want to say the word under God be removed from the classroom or just stand there silently, as has worked in many school districts across this country?
Because we have a Constitution, and the Constitution says that the majority doesn't get its way in certain areas. For instance, in race, it doesn't matter how many people want to have separate water fountains. If 95% of the population wants to have separate water fountains, you can't do it, because we have a Constitution. And if 95% of the population, or if 100% of the population wants to say that there's some religious entity that exists, it can't do it under our Constitution.
That's unfortunately,
which is a lovely thing. Why are you against that?
Well, unfortunately for your position, even though that's what you believe, that's not the law, that you are allowed to recognize God in this country, and that's what the pledge does, and that's why students are allowed
individuals
to.
are.
And that's why the Supreme Court has not yet adopted your position. We'll be right back. Michael Newdow, thanks.